Hey viewers and friends, Andrew back again and welcome to another slasher review, and today I'm here to review, finally, Hatchet 3. This has been a long review coming and it's taken me quite a while to pick up this release. Initially I planned to order it straight when it came out. That didn't happen. It arrived yesterday with a bunch of other stuff from Amazon, and I watched it immediately after I opened the package. So definitely wanted to upload this review for the film and let you guys know what I think of it. So you guys already know that I am a pretty big fan of the Hatchet films, the first two, especially part 2, which is probably my favourite modern slasher. I think that's a fantastic film. So my expectations were pretty high for this one, and yeah, let's find out if they were met. So the story behind Hatchet 3 is it follows directly after the events of the second film. But at the beginning, Mary Beth arrives at a police station. She thinks she's finally killed Victor Crowley. The cops don't believe her. The cops think that she was the murderer and basically put her under arrest. There's a reporter, like a journalist or something. She is the only one that believes Victor Crowley's real. Everyone else thinks that he's just a silly legend, and basically she tries and help Mary Beth get off the charge and put a stop to Victor Crowley altogether. Throw in a group of SWAT team members that go to the swamp to clear all the bodies out and investigate the murders more in depth, and you pretty much have this film. So what did I think of it? Well, as I said, I'm a massive fan of the first two films, so my expectations were really high with this one, and sadly this movie was one massive disappointment. Pretty much the entire film, honestly, really disappointed me. But I've got to say, the main thing that really, in my opinion, ruined this film was the pacing. The story and pacing were terribly done. This was extremely slow, especially compared to the first two films, and for the most part it was boring. Now, they sort of flicked between the story of Mary Beth and the reporter trying to figure out how to put a stop to Victor Crowley, and then they would go back to the SWAT team in the swamp. And that was pretty much the entire film. Now, the scenes in the swamp were pretty awesome, you know, there was some great action there, but when it went back to sort of the story between Mary Beth and the reporter, that was slow, it was tedious, extremely repetitive. The dialogue wasn't all that great between the characters, and it was pretty much stuff we already knew. They were basically recapping the first two films essentially, with the story of this one, and I didn't really care too much for that. The kills also were a major disappointment, especially compared to the first two movies. I think all up there were probably only 2 kills, maybe 3, that really sort of I took notice of and thought that they were pretty cool. The rest of them were all pretty average, very underwhelming, fairly mediocre. So that was a massive disappointment, because I was actually expecting the kills to possibly be a step up from part 2, but most certainly not. They weren't even close to the awesome kills in part 2. The rest of the characters weren't that great either. There were a few sort of horror icons in here. Danielle Harris, of course, came back as Mary Beth. I thought her character was awful in this one. She got to do absolutely nothing. Basically, the entire film was either her in a jail cell or her in the back of a police car. That was it. She basically did stuff all in this film. Apart from the ending, where she actually finally got to do something, her character was pretty boring, and I definitely wish that she had actually gone back into the swamp with the SWAT team, but sadly she didn't. There was also Sid Haig, and then Derek Mears also had a fairly big role in this one as well. They weren't too bad. But yeah, all the rest of the characters I thought were pretty average and fairly forgettable actually. So sadly, I did not really have an enjoyable time with this one. I mean, it wasn't a bad film, but when you compare it to the first two Hatchet movies, you know, it doesn't even compare. It's nowhere near as good. The probably only real positive thing that I got out of this film, to be completely honest, was the ending. Now, I've got to give it up to them. They did a fantastic job wrapping up the trilogy with this movie. So I've definitely got to give credit where credit's due. I thought the ending was fantastic, and it definitely wrapped up the series really, really well. The series pretty much ends with this film, so please do not make a Hatchet 4. Doesn't need to be done. I never really thought that I would say this about the Hatchet movies, but I think they're pretty much done. So hopefully they don't bother making a part 4. As I said, you know, they did a fantastic job finishing the trilogy with this one. So I'm definitely going to give them credit there, but honestly, that's pretty much the only really fantastic thing about this film. What I'm going to do at some point is probably watch all 3 movies back to back, because the series overall is really good for watching as a marathon. You know, essentially this is a one giant film, you know, part 1, 2 and 3. They do a really, really good job overlapping, but unfortunately it was kind of boring with the whole sort of storyline with Mary Beth and the reporter. It went through basically everything that we already knew from the previous 2 films. The kills were extremely underwhelming, the cast wasn't all that great, and Mary Beth basically got to do fuck all in the entire film, which was very, very disappointing. Plus, I didn't really think that she gave that good of a performance, to be honest, especially when you compare it to part 2. She was awesome in part 2, but not so much in this. But I mean, that probably had a lot to do with the role that she was actually given. And it kind of left me wondering, if Adam Green had directed this, would it have been a lot better? I'm thinking it may have been, and I wish that he had directed it. I mean, the first 2 movies were his. It would have been fantastic if he had actually wrapped up this series and directed Hatchet 3, but that wasn't the case. Anyway, guys, I've pretty much said everything that I wanted to say about this film. Yeah, it was pretty disappointing to me, and definitely the weakest out of the 3 films. However, if you are a fan of the first 2 films and you haven't seen it, I do recommend checking it out. As I said, it does wrap up the trilogy nicely. So it is score time, and I think I'm going to give this a score of 2.5 out of 5. So bang in the middle. Not that good, but then it wasn't terrible either. So that's been my review for Hatchet 3. If you've seen this film, please let me know what you think of it in the comments section below. I hope you've enjoyed my review, and thank you for watching.